Okay, so welcome back everybody. So in this video, we're gonna go over non-probability sampling. So let's imagine we're in this situation, right? We have people who are being sworn in as citizens. They've gone through a long journey, several difficulties to become citizens. And let's say we're interested in seeing, well, how do people feel? What are immigrants' sentiments towards the US and how fair the process is, right? And let's say we recruited from only this situation. So if we recruited these participants for that kind of study, consider, would that be representative of all immigrants in the US, right? There's undocumented immigrants. There's immigrants that are still stuck in limbo. There are people that are asking for asylum and they're still not sure if they're going to get asylum. So in those situations, so do you think, not in those situations, but do you think sampling from this, yes, the way I'm setting up the question isn't the best way to set it up. That's why I'm pausing. But instead, think about some issues that would arise from sampling from this situation or this population, right? Well, first of all, they might be feeling pretty good. They just got sworn in. They just received their citizenship. Even if they had a long process where they suffered a lot, they saw it as unfair previously, you recruit them at this moment, they're likely to share positive experiences and kind of have a positive view of the US or the US's immigration policy, right? So it's not going to be representative of what all immigrants are going through or what their views of the immigration process. So actually, before I go into the types of non-probability sampling, just a quick reminder. A non-probability sample means where you didn't random sample from the population of interest. So if your population of interest is all immigrants in the United States, a non-probability sample would mean you did not randomly choose from all immigrants in the US. You didn't care about that, or you just didn't do it, right? Instead, you recruited who was easy to recruit, or maybe who chose to participate, right? So keep that in mind. That's non-probability sampling, and we cannot generalize these findings to the population of interest. So anything I learn from these participants doesn't mean it's not useful, right? Because we could learn about how people experience becoming citizens, but we can't apply these findings to all immigrants. The first non-probability sampling technique is convenience sampling. So convenience sampling is when you choose whoever is easiest to recruit. So if I wanted to study 18 to 25-year-olds, that for me might be my classes at CSUN. I recruit only my students, I give them extra credit, easy. Or maybe I'm on campus at 6 a.m., then I recruit whoever's on campus at 6 a.m. I'm already on campus, I'm going to recruit those students, easy. So think of it that way. It's who's easiest for me to recruit, who's convenient for me to recruit. Now, purposive sampling is similar to, let me actually go back a few slides. Similar to stratified sampling. The main difference is that you're recruiting a specific demographic, right? So let's say I want to understand the experience of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. I'm recruiting only that people from that ethnic background, and I do so in a non-random way. I just recruit whoever I come across. I go to a class that's focusing on a topic, ask the class, does anybody identify as this ethnicity? Okay, all of you, I want you in my study, right? That would be purposive sampling in a non-random way. Here's another example from your textbook. A team of researchers wanted to understand what the significance of white skin and whiteness means to white people. Like, what does that mean to a person who's white? Do they reflect on being white? Is it something they think about? So in that case, I might recruit people who, same approach. I might go to a class and ask, do you identify as white? You probably wouldn't want to do this, but people might go to different people and ask them, you wouldn't ask, are you white? You would ask, hi, I'm doing a study on people's perception of race. I'm looking for people who identify as white. Do you identify as white? Would you be willing to participate in my study? Now, that's a better way to say that. It's still not random. You're going over to people. You're not randomly selecting them. You're not looking at all CSUN students and selecting randomly CSUN students who identified as white. You're going to people and choosing in a non-random way, right? So purposive sampling is when you recruit a certain type of participant in a non-random way. Snowball sampling is when you recruit participants and you ask them, do you know anybody else who would be willing to participate too? So let's say you were interested in understanding Disney fanatics. I don't know if any of you know a Disney fanatic. I have a few who I know who have year passes and go several times a year. It's difficult during COVID, but people used to do that. People will do that again. I recruit one person, my friend. They're convenient. I know them. And then I ask them, hey, would you happen to know anybody else who loves Disney as much as you do? Oh yeah, can you introduce me? Can you connect us? And then you recruit that person and then ask them to participate. Now, some people might want to study that, but let's say you want to study something like South Asian participants and their experience at CSUN. Now, you might initially have a hard time recruiting South Asian students because usually the way we group them is just into the Asian category, and you might use a snowball approach. You know somebody who's South Asian, you ask them, hey, do you know anybody else who's South Asian? And let's say you're interested in recent immigrants who are South Asian. An even more difficult population to recruit. Hey, do you know anybody else who's from an immigrant background who is also South Asian? Would you mind introducing me to them? And then recruiting them, and so on, right? As you go, your sample increases and snowballs into a bigger sample, like you see in the image. And how you see in cartoons, I don't know if that actually happens in real life. Some people are probably laughing. I have no experience with the snow. I grew up in California. All right, so quota sampling. Now, actually, let me go back a slide. So purposive sampling, I said it was like stratified as random sampling, but quota sampling is actually more like this. So in purposive sampling, you're only recruiting a certain type of person. It might be ethnicity, it might not be, right? So keep that in mind. You're not breaking them up into different ethnic groups and trying to get a representation of everybody. You're interested in purposive sampling in a specific type of person, which might be people who identify as white, as South Asian, as Korean, or people who are recent immigrants. Snowball sampling, you ask people, do they know people, and you try to increase your sample in that way. So word of mouth, kind of. Quota sampling, it's similar to stratified sampling. So this one is similar to stratified sampling, but you're not so interested in percentage, and there's no random sampling. Instead, you break up that strata into ethnic groups. You still do that part. So you might still say, okay, we have these different ethnic groups at CSUN, but I'm not trying to match the percentage of the population of interest, all CSUN students. Instead, I choose a number. Now, this might be a number because of the statistical analysis, but it's kind of arbitrary, other than you need enough to run that stats analysis. But you choose that number, let's say 80. Here I put 80. And now you keep recruiting people in a non-random way until you get to 80 per group. So you would have people, you would have 80 American Indian Alaskan students, 80 Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students, 80 African American students, 80 Latino students, 80 Asian students, and so on, right? So this would be quota sampling. It's similar to that previous approach, except you're just setting an arbitrary number you're aiming for, and you're not using random sampling. Now, you have a summary of all the sampling techniques in your textbook. You have probability sampling, you have non-probability sampling, and here you have all the types of probability and non-probability sampling. So keep that in mind. Use this chart kind of to guide you and remember what you need to know in terms of sampling, or the types of sampling you need to make sure you know. Again, if you have questions, reach out. Make sure you know the different types of sampling. Make sure you can think of examples of each of the sampling. So in the exam, what I would do is give you an example of a sampling technique and then ask you, can you match this example with a type of sampling? So in other words, I'll give you the example and I'll ask you, what kind of sampling is this? Is it systematic? Is it convenience? Is it quota? Is it oversampling? Know the types of sampling. Or I might ask you, is this probability sampling or non-probability sampling? So know both, right? Know the categories, know the types of different sampling within the probability and non-probability sampling approaches.